Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm JJ Flizanes, your host. Thank you for downloading today's episode. Today, I believe, is the first show that has been recorded, both this intro and the interview, in my new space. So I just wanted you to be aware of that in case you hear some different acoustics. I don't have a quote-unquote sound studio quite yet, although there may be a need for one. Since where we moved, there is a lot more noise. So I have to deal with that and figure out the best times to record and edit and all that good stuff. So today's show is Return of the Gentleman, and I'm really excited to share Dr. Dain here with you. He is a true gentleman. We recorded this show, and then when we were done, he felt the need to offer himself to me to help me for a few minutes with sort of clearing some of the energies that have been weighing me down during this move and that have lingered after we moved in officially. And, part of law of attraction and being in receiving mode is when someone offers you something, especially to help you, you say yes. And so I said yes. And of course, he was a wonderful healer and just gentleman. So, he really lives up to the name of being a gentleman because he just felt the need to want to continue to work with me and have this conversation and to aid in my experience. And so I do appreciate that. So in terms of asking for something, so now in return, I'm going to ask you for something. If you listen to this show and you enjoy it and you get value out of it, regardless of which one of my shows you tune into on a regular basis, I have been nominated under the category of religion and spirituality for Spirit, Purpose, and Energy, as well as the People's Choice Award for Spirit, Purpose, and Energy. So I would really appreciate and love and be so grateful if you would consider taking 5 minutes. You do have to register an account and you get verified so that it's a real email address, but I don't believe they send you any emails. And if they do, just opt out, but I have yet to get one. And I've been registered for a month. jjflizanes.com/vote. As again, that's JJ Flizanes. For those of you that are new to the show, it's jjflizanes.com/vote. And again, there's 2 categories that my show falls under. The first one is the People's Choice Award. It's a really long list of shows. And then a smaller list, the more important one that I'm asking for you to vote for the show, is Religion and Spirituality category for Spirit, Purpose, and Energy. Thank you. Thank you so much in advance. The voting ends on July 31st, so we're 1 day away, and it's a last minute ask. So I really appreciate your support there. So on to today's episode. Dr. Dain here is an influencer of change and inspiration with a community of over 1 million people. Millions of people engage with him across social media, and his videos regularly go viral on social media. He is a popular speaker, author, and inviter to greatness and consciousness. Originally raised in the ghettos of Los Angeles and trained as a chiropractor, Dr. Heer is also the co-founder of a diverse range of businesses around the world. A conscious and creative thought leader with a profound understanding of the power of personal creation, Dr. Heer draws upon his background and unique perspective to facilitate positive change in the world and empower people from every culture, country, age, and social strata to create the money, relationships, and life they truly desire. Welcome to the show, Dr. Dain.
JJ, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I love the topic of your book, The Return of the Gentleman, and I think that it's such a timely concept that we are not having conversations about, especially what's going on in the world. Like the idea of a gentleman seems like we're talking about the 1950s or the 1930s right now because of all the creative chaos that's going on and sort of upheaval of our belief systems and the masculine presence in the world. And I feel like there's this true transition happening. And
yes,
your book, Return of the Gentleman, just really speaks to, for me, that it's not about moving in a direction where we're losing sort of a foundation. And I want to go into why you've written it, who you wrote it for, your own journey, because one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show is because as much as I speak to women, and I speak to women and men, I've got both equal parts when it comes to listeners, from Spirit, Purpose, and Energy to women, men, and relationships to Fit to Love and nutrition and alternative medicine. All my different shows really illuminate sort of what is common and real for all of us, not just the men or the women. However, on some of the shows, Women in Relationships and Spirit, Purpose, Energy, we talk about things like masculine and feminine energy and first, second, and third stage relationship growth and sort of what's happened with men. So let's start off with, I know that you have a background in being a chiropractor and you live in Los Angeles. Why don't you tell us your story on how do we end up here in you writing a book about being a gentleman when you were a chiropractor?
Well, how long do we have? That's a long story in itself.
So sound bites, just think in sound bites.
Yeah, I know, you're like, think small, think small. Basically, what happened for me is I actually, for the last 19 years, have done a body of work called Access Consciousness and have helped co-create it around the world. And we're in 174 countries at this point. And I had a young man come to me and he said, I just want to say thank you. Between you and Gary Douglas, the founder, I realize I can be the man I always wanted to be. He said, I have done internet searches since I was 16, and the only thing I could find online was either how to get women in bed or how to pretend you're something you're not so people will like you. He said, being around you guys has shown me that I can be kind, I can be caring, I can be sexual and adore women and also stand up for women's rights and have women's backs. And I never saw this anywhere else in the world. And I was like, whoa, really? And then three other guys who were at the same class came over and said, that's true for us too. And I went, wow, we need to have a different conversation. And basically, if you look at it, we, both men and women, had highly defined roles back in the 40s, 50s, 60s. Well, they started melting in the 60s. And, culminating in our current world today where men are facing an identity crisis. A lot of women are facing an identity crisis. But the one thing that I'm really grateful for is a lot of women have a lot of resources where they can actually have conversations to pick apart and get to what's true for them. And so what I wanted to do was create a resource for men, but I really need to make this point. This is not exclusive of the ladies in the world. This is inclusive. This is a different conversation. This is not, let's claim our masculine power and exclude the feminine. No, no, no. This is where we get the power, the potency we actually are by embracing what is traditionally masculine, embracing what is traditionally feminine, and using it to create something that is greater than either one of those separate and actually allows them all to be part of what contributes to who you get to be.
So that was the inspiration for you to write the book, correct?
Yes.
Well, prior to that kind of work, what were you, or writing the book, were you blending access consciousness at all with chiropractic, or was it something you learned or discovered or figured out or created back in that time frame and then sort of left that behind? Because I've evolved. I started out as a personal trainer, and to be quite honest, the only reason why I started out as a trainer was because it was an easier in and starting to work with people than to go get a degree for psychology. Or as time progressed and I learned more science, it was easier than becoming a doctor, even though I was very interested in the credentials and in the information, more the credentials for the respect, and people would just sort of listen because I saw how people just immediately see you a doctor. They're like, oh, well, whatever you say goes. And I'm like, no, that's not how it is. But if that's what I have to do to get you to listen, because I have your best interest in mind,
right.
then I'm considering it. So, my transformation started sort of in that physical body area and moved on to now my greatest work is law of attraction and relationship work and mind, body, soul integration. So what about how did that jump go?
Well, I love that you say that because that is exactly my point of view. And funny, I was a personal trainer and dealing with training and nutrition as a way of connecting with people. And then I started seeing a chiropractor, and there was a book sitting on the table with all of these different muscle testing techniques with nutritional protocols where you could change everything from ADHD to HIV to depression. And I was like, this is what I want to do. This is the kind of change I want to create. So I was like, I'm being a chiropractor. So I went and, got my degree, and I did not see the miracle showing up. That was why I became a chiropractor. I really wanted to create some fundamentally dynamic shift in their entire experience of their bodies, but also the reality around them and how they lived. And I didn't see that showing up. I got to a place 19 years ago where I was going to end my life because I wasn't seeing the miracles and the happiness show up in my relationship, in my practice. And I said, universe, you got 6 months. Either my life changes or I'm out of here. And I was one of those people who was a seeker. I would do weekend workshops and I would read books and all this sort of thing and think I found the answer. And then 3 days later, there was no answer, and the universe came crashing back in on my head. And a week after making that demand, I came across Access Consciousness. And I had one session of something called Access Consciousness bars. And I literally never contemplated killing myself again. And that's I was in California, so we do all kinds of weird stuff in California. And it was just this light touch technique on the head, but there was this energy that became present, this peace, this knowing that everything was okay. And so after that, it was like, wait, I want to do this. This is the energy of miracles that I always hoped and knew was possible. And so I started working with the founder, and over the last 19 years, we've co-created this, like I said, into a worldwide organization. But it was from that exact thing that you're talking about. I desired dynamically to contribute to people. And so this Return of the Gentleman is one offshoot of that. And I think it's a vital conversation that I hope opens the door for people to have even more conversations about really getting to be the authentic them, because that's really what the idea and the concept behind Return of the Gentleman is. It's not exclusion, it's inclusion of what's really true for you, and shrugging off a lot of the roles that we bought that don't work for us.
What would you say your transformation was in terms of this Return of the Gentleman? Like, was it something that you think you moved from? I mean, I get that you had that moment, and you had the agreement with the universe that life needed to change, and you found work that lit your soul and created magic in your life and others. And at that point, though, we're not looking at you as a gentleman. I mean, we're taking a piece out of that, right, in terms of being authentic. And I'm wondering if you identified, because I can identify certain sections and chapters of my experience and my journey of where in the beginning, I would take it personally when people didn't listen to me, or when they ignored my advice, or when they didn't believe me. I'd take it personally, and I had to learn over time that it wasn't about me, and that it was about their journey. And so my growth, and even now with the podcast, the more people that you reach, the more opportunity there is for people to reject you, for them to criticize you. And through that experience and standing in my true authentic self, not giving myself permission to do what I want to be doing and what I think I'm good at without anyone else telling me I can or can't, has allowed me to come into a new space of confidence, or of being grounded, of being centered, of being non-reactive, of healing wounds. So is there a point in which, around the topic of being a man or being a gentleman, that you found, like, wow, like doing this makes me feel like a man, but a combination of sort of a new identity of what a man should be in a way that feels good to me, that I get to incorporate all of the things? And actually, before you answer that, I have a feeling you're a Pisces, but can you tell me what your birthday is?
I'm actually a Gemini.
Oh, okay. All right.
I wonder. I can feel a lot of listeners go, okay, turn off the podcast. We'll go to the next one after that comment.
No, not at all. Not at all. But I wouldn't. You had the Pisces duality, and sort of that water/air feeling, right? Water and air have similar feelings because they flow. And so there's that flow that you have, there's that intuition piece that you have. So I'd be curious to see, do you know anything else about your chart, like your moon sign or anything?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, as I digress, but there's this resonance that I have in your energy that feels, but Gemini is awesome too, because it's about thoughts and thinking and concepts and ideas. And so anyway, so as I digress, so go back to answering my question, the original question, which was there a moment in time in which you sort of decided that, besides the feedback that you got about someone, learning how to be a man through your work and your example, what about your own relationship to that word?
Oh, goodness. Well, what I would say is, for me, it's been an ongoing unfolding over the last 19 years, and I think any of us who are truly doing the work of, getting more aware of ourselves and the world, it's a continuous unfolding that never stops, thank goodness. Otherwise, we'd get so bored we'd want to leave the planet. But for me, having the gift of Gary Douglas, who is, like I said, he was the founder of Access. He's my best friend. He's been my best friend for 19 years and my business partner for 19 years. And to see how he interacted in the world that was so different than any of the males in my life. So I grew up with horrendous male role models for the most part. But it never when they would say be this way, I was like, ah, that doesn't really fit with me. And so I could never do it. So I always felt like I never got it. I always felt like I never got how to be a man. And when I was around Gary, he honored himself, but he also honored other people. And he also had trust that they would be who they were. And he had this vulnerability with people where he was just him. He would show up warts and all. And I saw the change that that created in people around him. And so it was this really amazing thing of being around somebody who truly embodies this for 19 years, who doesn't say, "Hi, I'm a gentleman." He just says, "Hi," and that really for me has been this ongoing transformation. And I could point to many places along the way where I thought I only had the choice of being one way, not really liking myself being that way, and then finding out, wait a minute, the reason I'm not liking myself being this way is because this is not really me. So as I went through that phase of doing everything I could to find the right relationship and finding relationship after relationship, but I wasn't really in the relationships. And Gary said, "Well, so what would it be like if you were you here?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, okay, so what have you stopped doing since you started this relationship?" I went, "Well, I stopped jogging. I stopped hanging out with my friends. I stopped doing anything other than devoting my time and attention to her because," and this is another thing that goes on for the kind, caring men of this world that actually truly do value women. And I'd say there are a lot of us out there. We just feel like we haven't had a voice, is in an effort not to be like the other guys, the ones that seem not to respect women and not to value them. We go to the other side where we try to make ourselves a doormat. And I was doing that too. And Gary said, "So if you brought those things back into your life, would it make your relationship worse or better?" And I went, better, because I'd be a lot happier. I'd be actually a lot more present. And I would have my own sources of sort of energy and contribution and happiness and joy. And I could bring that to the relationship. He said, "Well, why don't you start there?" And as I started doing that, I started recognizing the different women that I was with where they were like, "Yay, I'm so glad to have more of you back." And then I started realizing on the other side, the women that were like, "Why are you not making your life all about me anymore?" And that was one of the getting sort of walking that path was one of the things that made me so aware of dynamics in relationship. And also for the last 19 years I've been facilitating men and women on their relationship stuff. And what we do in Access is we just ask a question. We go, "What is this? What do I do with it? Can I change it? How do I change it?" We throw out all of the models that everybody else is using, and we're willing to use any part of it, but not make that the source and say, "Oh, this is what it is." And what we found was the challenges that so many men and women have is from the place where they're giving themselves up for somebody else's idea of what's true, not just in relationship, quote unquote, an intimate relationship, but in all areas of their lives. And that was true for me too. And as I stopped doing that, I started noticing that people actually wanted to be around me more. The people that used to judge me stopped judging me. And I realized, oh, if somebody's judging you, there's somewhere where you're judging you for that. Otherwise, it wouldn't matter. And so there are lots of things that occurred over the last 19 years that got me to this point where I'm like, we need to do this from a different place.
I love that. And I would encourage everyone listening, those of you that are women thinking about your guys, obviously to share the show, but to also take a check into yourself, because as I'm sure you know very well, that women do it too. The whole idea of losing yourself in by pleasing others or wanting to, I talk a lot about people pleasing because it's really an addiction that people think, because they pat themselves on the back and say, but I'm doing a good thing. I'm being nice to
Yes.
people and I want them to like me. Right. But you're wanting them to like you in an inauthentic way because you're actually acting for them, and then you're hoping based on what their response is that that's going to make you feel safe. And it's a false sense of safety, it's a false sense of security, and it's not real. But we continue to tell ourselves, but I'm a nice person, but I'm a nice, it's like workaholism. Oh, but I'm
Yeah,
working. Oh, but I'm working. Oh, but I'm working, I'm making money, I'm helping other people.
exactly.
Right
It's
until
false and it's fleeting. You can't, that's not long lasting, because if that person then goes into some judgment of you, then your whole world comes crashing down. It's not a place where you are the power in your life.
Right. It's giving up your power immediately to someone else. And it isn't, it's becoming a victim willingly. And then again, you are susceptible to just about anything if that's the way you go. So let's talk about how men can be more authentically themselves and not disempower themselves.
Well, okay. So for me, I'm a firm believer in giving people tools because it's one thing to know something should be different. It's another thing to be able to get there. And unfortunately, I can't sort of go into some of the meat of the access consciousness tools because they take too long to explain, which is why we have the classes we do. So let me try this. One of the things that we found is that somewhere around 98% of our thoughts, feelings, our emotions, our judgments, our points of view, and the things we think are true for us are things that we bought from other people. Primarily, of course, our parents, because we were around them the most. You know, you come to this planet and you're a little baby and you're looking around going, wow, how do they do it here? Okay. And what you do is you reach your energetic feelers out and you pick up on how mom does it, how dad does it. And most of this is energetic and most of it is pre-verbal. So one of the things I found is by the time you're 2 years old, you've already developed an identity of who you think you are, but it's primarily from reaching into your mom and dad's world to see who they are, and your siblings and family, of course. So one of the things that can really help is if you'll write down the top 3 men in your life that influence you and the top 3 women in your life that influenced you, and then write down all the good and all the bad characteristics you got from them. Now, fully realizing good and bad are judgments, okay? And look at that and go, okay, which of these would I like to be? And like, and in that, you're probably going to find a lot of things that are true for your mom, true for your dad, true for the people that were role models in your life that have characteristics you don't want, but also some that you do. And then also write down the top 3 people that you admire. Because one of the things about admiration is when we admire somebody, we see in them characteristics that we have also that we're usually not willing to express and we're usually not willing to choose to be. And so this can also be another clue because in what I'm trying to get people to in this is what's actually true for you. So if you can look back at the top 3 men and women that you bought your points of view from, both good and bad, and then also the top 3 people you admire and write down all the characteristics you admire about them, what you're going to find is a blending in that of, okay, here's what I bought, here's what I've been acting like I am, but here's what I would really like to be. And in that, you can start to get a sense of what's true for you. And then for the next, I don't know, 3 days or a week, keep that list with you of all the things you admire, the things that you would actually like to be. Write it on your phone or something so you can see it. Check in maybe every day and just see how much you're choosing that in your daily life. And then see also how much you're not. And what happens is just with that awareness, our attitude starts to shift and our awareness starts to shift of us going from living a life and exhibiting characteristics and making choices that have very little to do with us to the space of starting to, and I say starting to, we've got over 8,000 tools in Access. Okay. So this is just one tiny thing, but we can start to finally get a sense of what's true from us, but from this slightly different perspective of looking at the good, the bad, and the ugly that we've been carrying around, and hopefully getting rid of as much of the bad and the ugly that is not us as we can.
I think that's a great exercise for everyone to do. As you said, there are plenty more, but that's enough stuff to uncover a bunch of things to start working on. And I know that, while there are ways for us to start to look at what it is we want to gravitate towards, what are some of the signs that a man or anyone is not being his authentic self?
Unhappiness, depression, anxiety, lack of sexual desire, and a sense of, the word just escaped me, but a sense of wrongness, like judgment of self. These are signs that we're not actually in touch and living from what's actually true for us. And this conversation is it's really about us being able to get underneath the layers, because once we get underneath the layers even a little bit and start getting to a little bit more of what's true for us and then a lot more of what's true, the level of happiness in our life starts to rise, and also the level of contribution we can be to ourselves and other people.
I think that's brilliant. Unhappiness, depression, anxiety, lack of sexual desire. What else did you say?
Judgment, that old thing, where we judge ourselves continuously.
Yeah, to me, it boils down to you're either in alignment with who you truly are or you're not. And any of these negative emotions are indicators that you're not in alignment. So that would be a great way to look at, how am I not being authentic? How am I not being honest? And it's for everyone across the board, women and men, especially you women out there. I've heard talked about anxiety on this show so many times, and anxiety and depression and unhappiness, these are things that aren't floating in the air that you catch like a disease. It's not outside of yourself. It all originates on the inside of yourself. So for us to ask the question, how am I not being honest with myself? What am I in denial about? What do I have resistance to? Would be definitely another way to take this work and start to ask yourself, I mean, you're not being authentic if you're having all these negative emotions. And I think that is very simplistic in a good way, because too often we want to overcomplicate things and make it about, oh, this environment, this and that. And I'm not saying those things don't matter, but when we get down to what can we control, what can we influence, what do we have power over? We have power over what we think about. We have power over what we focus what we focus on, and the story that we're telling ourselves. And any of the work that we can do, any of the awarenesses, the unlocking of our consciousness, the thinking about our thoughts, the being grateful and appreciative and being in the moment right now. And I'm sure there are so many tools within Access Consciousness that can address how someone can get back into what I'm calling alignment and into what you're calling being authentic, correct?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, that's, a huge part of what the work is. Whether it looks like we're working on our relationship problems, our self-esteem, our anxiety, our stress, our depression, our money problems, it's all really about that. And one of the things I want to say that might be helpful, it's been extremely helpful to me over the last 19 years actually, but was really helpful when I was dealing with suicidal thoughts and depression, was one of the things that we found is 98% of your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your judgments are not yours. I know I've already said that, but saying it twice never hurts, because people think, no, it's in my head, it's mine. Well, one of the things we found is we're so energetically aware, and this is something most people don't talk about. And it's strange to me that energy has such a weird connotation, but it's actually one of the most practical applications. It's one of the most practical things that you can use in your awareness and in your sort of path to possibilities and beyond problems. And so one of the tools that we found is, if you will ask, who does this belong to every thought, feeling, emotion, and stuck point of view, all that stuff that makes you heavy. If you'll ask, who does this belong to, and it lightens up at all, it's not yours. And all you do is return it to sender. And if it comes back later, you go, okay, everywhere I bought that as mine, and everything I've created based on buying that as mine or destroyed, I now let that go and return it to sender. And what it starts to do, if you'll do this for 3 days, if you ask, who does this belong to every thought, feeling, emotion, judgment, and heavy point of view you have, at the end of 3 days, you walk around like you're in a walking, talking meditation. You can walk through any city in the world and have no thoughts in your head, which is where I function, which is really nice, because what that means is you're no longer swayed by the world around you. But we have this thing in our head that makes us believe if we're aware of it, it's ours. And what I say to people, have you ever walked into a room, or have you ever, you were happy, you walked into a room where people are sad, and all of a sudden you get sad? Well, everybody's had that experience. Or you walked into a room where somebody was angry, and all of a sudden you were either defensive or angry. And well, is that yours? No, the energy's in the air, basically. And so to the extent that we can undo the things that aren't ours, our journey becomes a lot easier. Because if you could imagine emptying 98% of the monkey mind out of your head today, and you only had to deal with 2% tomorrow, how much easier would things get? But that a lot of people go, well, yeah, you're just blaming somebody else. I'm like, no, look at it this way. What's the difference between I'm sad, which now you are, once you've said I'm sad, now you own it. The difference between that and I perceive sadness is a world of difference, because when you recognize you're perceiving something, it's not something you own anymore, and it's not something you look to find the source of. You go, wow, I'm really aware. Well, this is actually using that, because we think the things that we perceive are actually us because they seem to be in our head. But what if 98% of them aren't? And one other tool that can be really helpful is, what's true always makes you lighter. A lie always makes you heavier. What's true for you makes you lighter. A lie for you makes you heavier. And we all have different things that are true for us based on our experience, our points of view, whatever. And if we can start to get to those things that make us lighter when we choose them, and lighter when we be them, then our life starts to get lighter and lighter.
I do love the checking in with, does this feel lighter? Does this feel heavier? And it would explain, I've been going through my own transition in a move. It would explain why I feel so heavy, because I know I've been taking the victim role and I'm aware that I'm doing it and I'm aware of all the parts and pieces of it. And I,
Isn't that, don't you, isn't it? It's like one of those things, like it would be one thing if you weren't aware of it, and you're like, yes, this is, because some life strategy, oh, this works for me or whatever. But then when you're aware of it and you're still choosing it, you're like, that's when you just want to go out and have a good scream at the universe for like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah, I've just been doing a lot of crying. I did scream when the first bunch of boxes got unpacked and put into places I didn't want them to go, not by me, and I screamed in frustration, and that felt good, and the process. But this consciousness piece, I have some people in my life who I know very clearly, and some of it's based on astrology, that they, and lack of consciousness, that they think that everything they think is real. And it's that it's again what you just said about, if you can perceive something, if you're aware that your thoughts aren't real, they're not you, that they are information or their judgments or their interpretations, and they're not, and you can, and they may not be yours. And we get inherited stuff from our parents, and we do walk into rooms, and if the more empathic you are, the more open your energetic field is, the more you're going to take in people's crap that isn't yours. And so every part along the way of that is really being able to discern, is, like you said, is this mine? What am I doing? When I was 21, I was in a very dysfunctional relationship. I'd come out of college. I was in a really great relationship with my first boyfriend in college for like 4.5 years. And I thought we were going to get married, and we were best friends. And then that relationship ended up ending, just because part of me said, you're 21. Do you really think this is it? Like, you need to grow up and live life and figure out who you are. And if it's meant to be, you'll come back to it. And so the next relationship, which didn't function at all like the first one, I kept trying to make him my best friend, make him my companion, make him do all these things. He was my boss. He was 8 years older. And it took me 2.5 years of journaling, of recognizing. And so I think about that time. I literally, now it's never going to be that long again, but it took me 2.5 years. I recognized from the beginning it was a lesson. I recognized this is not the end. I recognized this is not the guy. I recognized all that stuff, yet I stayed. And I write about it, and I journal about it, and I'd say, please God, let the lesson be learned and let it be over. Now, in retrospect, I learned a lot during that 2.5 year period. It was a gift, and I've never needed to repeat the length of time. I was a prisoner to my own struggle, if you will, but the insight that it gave me, the psychology, the awareness, the consciousness was really, it was a psychology lesson for me. And so, but I also recognize that a lot of people don't have that. They still are stuck in believing, men and women, that if I think it, it must be true. If I feel it, it must be true. It must be truth. And other people must know it too. How do you address, in the work that you do in both Access Consciousness as well as in, especially with men, with women? I mean, goodness, Return of the Gentleman. Women are traditionally much more emotional and expressive, and sometimes even more victim consciousness. They want to blame the men. They want to emotionally manipulate men. I mean, how do you help men survive that barrage of what women emotionally manipulating them into? You hurt my feelings, and you need to do this differently. I mean, how do you teach them, men and women, that to take emotional responsibility, to not take in someone blaming them or trying to emotionally manipulate them, and sort of this awareness of that your thoughts and your feelings aren't necessarily truth?
Well, that's a great question. It's actually, speaking to the 2.5 year experience you had, it's like I can relate to that exactly. Um, and the time getting shorter and shorter over the years because I didn't have the tools to change it. And I just knew if I were just a better man, things would work out in my relationship. I was wrong, by the way, um, because I didn't have the tools to actually look at what was going on, which is one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves. So I actually wrote the book for one of the reasons is actually to shorten that time frame. There's a lot of questions in there. There's also a lot of processes in there that are about getting people to get out of the drama and also recognize, like you said, and you talked about this at the very beginning, it's not personal. And yet we tend to live life as though everything that occurs around us is about us and is our fault, or is our problem to handle and deal with. But 99% of what goes on around us is not personal. And if we can start to recognize that, okay, then we have a different footing on which to stand. But also, the thing we need to recognize about somebody who plays the role of victim is that victim, victimizer, and control all swim together. And the person playing the victim is actually victimizing others with how badly they've been victimized, so they can actually get control of the situation. And if we can recognize that, then when somebody does victim around us, we can look and go, oh, you're just trying to get control. Okay. Now, if we want to let them have control or feel like they have control, if that's what makes our lives easier, okay, fine. In most cases, that may not be what we choose, or it may. But what we have to realize is we keep looking for the right and wrong and the good and bad. We keep trying to be right, and we keep trying not to be wrong. We keep trying to be good, and we keep trying not to be bad. But so this work I do is called Access Consciousness for a reason, and we have a definition of consciousness, which is where everything and everyone exists, and no one and nothing is judged. And if we can get out of, and we have some dynamic processes that we use, verbal processes actually, to help people get out of right and wrong. But this is one of the biggest things that sticks us, not only in our relationships, but in our lives, because the victim really needs to be right. And then if you're somebody who does the victim role, and let's face it, nowadays, the old philosophical question, if a tree falls in the forest, is the man still wrong? The answer is yes. And that seems to be the idea in the world. And yet the men that are going to be reading this book and the ladies that are going to be reading this book are looking for something different, because it's actually, when somebody goes to say they're a victim because you're a man and men have this and men do this, my point of view is women have so much power that they have been told they don't have, that they bought the idea that they don't have. And that's where a huge amount of this resentment comes from, and anger, because the one time it's appropriate to get angry is when somebody lies to you. And so if we can recognize that the idea that women do not have the power that they do is one of the lies that's perpetrated in society, well, that then opens the door for this current view of men are wrong and they're holding us down. And that will anger all of us, because it's a lie for men and women. And are there men that try to hold women down? Of course. We see this dynamically in the world, and I'm so glad it's coming out of the closet and people are talking about it. But what we have to also recognize is the men like me in the world, the gentlemen in the world, the ones that desire to be gentlemen, are equally as outraged about what is going on in the name of man, as though that somehow reflects on us as men. And all we want to do is change it, because that's not the way things should be, nor is it the way we desire them to be.
Well, you have a lot of work to do. And I'm kidding.
True story.
I mean, I don't mean on you. I just mean in the world. And I'm joking, and because it's my mission as well, right? Is to want to sort of wake people up to a different way of thinking and being more authentic and conscious. So if you had three, like what were the three most important things that every man should know in order to be a better gentleman?
Number one, stop judging you and stop judging women. Number two, write out this question: if I were truly creating my life today, what would I choose right away? And get in touch with what you truly desire. And when all those voices come in about you're supposed to do this, otherwise you're not right, you're supposed to do this, just push them to the side and go, no, what is actually true for me? And the third thing is ask yourself, what contribution can I be today to myself and to everyone around me? And I'm going to add a fourth, which is basically part of the first one, is if I dropped all judgment of me and everyone else today, what would I choose? And go through the world with that question for a day or two or three, or maybe, the next 20 or 30 years, and start to notice the different possibilities you have for going beyond this cancer called judgment, and its requirement for aligning and agreeing with people's points of view and resisting and reacting.
So the three questions sounded more like 6 and 7, and that's
You're welcome.
totally cool. No, yeah, that's okay. Over deliver. I feel like, I'm the same, like the complex question. Like if you only give me 3, I'm going to make it 6 by
Yes.
and an or in each line, right? Just to fit in more, because we don't want to oversimplify sometimes, because some people think and take that as an out to not look a little bit different.
Yes.
So So, all right. So there's a ton of information, obviously, in everything that you're doing. And I know you've got some free lessons on one of your websites. Do we want to send them to returnofthegentleman.com? Is that where they can also purchase the book?
Yes, and yeah, the free lessons are there. So on the Return of the Gentleman website, there's the free lessons. You can also get the book there. And what I want people to know is change doesn't have to be nearly as hard as we thought it was. This is like a time for a personal development upgrade, and you still have to do the work, but for the work that you do, you should get the greatest result possible. And that's really what my point of view is.
And I agree. And I think that people think doing the work is hard, too hard. And sometimes it is. But here's what I think is worse is when you're in the suffering of not doing it. When you are in sort of the lack of consciousness that I'm fine, it's that, years later you have a panic attack or anxiety attack that you have no idea where it came from, or you got cancer, you have a heart attack, or, your wife leaves you unexpectedly, or you get fired, or it's the things that you didn't see the warning signs of because you weren't conscious of it. And,
Yes.
and so the pain of that is going to be a lot more, in my opinion, than the uncomfortable discomfort of actually being conscious of the changes that you want to make, and then using the tools that you're giving them and the tools that I've given them to do that. And then also knowing that you have a community of support, because Access Consciousness, like you said, is all over the world, right? You have a ton of people who are part of that community. And I've got people part of my Spirit, Purpose, and Energy and podcast community and Manifestation Challenge community. And so that support right there, I think, lets us know we're all connected and that we're all on a similar journey.
So true. And that thing that, you were talking about where you go, okay, yeah, it may be uncomfortable to do the work, but if I were listening and I wanted some changes in my life, I would look to you and go, okay, she's been able to do it. Like, I like listening to her. She feels like she's somebody who, is not doesn't have it all together, but has got it way more together than she did a few years ago. Okay, cool. So there are these sources of inspiration for us. And the other thing I say to people, as far as the doing the work, it's like, if you ever remember what it was like when you were 20 years old and you looked at your body and judged it, and then, well, let's just say a particular person, depending on how old they are, at 20 years old, they look at their body and they go, oh my God, my body is just not nearly enough. And then they wake up at 30 and look at their body and go, geez, I wish I had the body when I was 20, and then they wake up at 40 going, I wish I had my body when I was 30, that I had when I was 30. And it's the same thing with all of this. It's like, if you start now, uh, God, the rewards are phenomenal. And I personally, I know so many people who believe that change is difficult or impossible. And when they start on the journey, they start realizing the rewards of it. And I got to say, the rewards far outweigh the work that's put in. And having a life where you like to wake up in the morning and you like the person looking back at you from the mirror, there's nothing that could be compared to that.
I agree. There's nothing better than knowing that it doesn't matter what anyone says to you. When you've healed some of your own wounds and you know it's about them, you can have compassion for them and be unscathed by anyone else's mood, anyone else's
Yes.
attitude, anyone else's stuff. And that's a power that I just really appreciate. I appreciate being able to walk the flames, if you will, and not get burned. And or if I do, that it's just an indication that there's something else I need to address, and that's
Yeah.
okay, and that there's nothing wrong, and I'm not judging myself. It's just part of the process. So let's talk about quickly the free lessons. What are some of the lessons that are included on the returnofthegentleman.com?
Well, there are furtherance of what we've spoken about today, and I think 45 minutes. I don't have an exact length. I like to talk a lot, as you've already noticed, but I like to talk a lot to give people more. Like, here's more ways of changing this stuff. But what it basically boils down to is, how do you get to be that person that likes yourself in the mirror? And some really simple things, like we mentioned, who does this belong to, as one way of clearing your head, which really works because you can't deal with something if it's not yours. We've got a lot of other tools on there. Something I use called the clearing statement, which is a way of getting underneath without having to go through visualization and trauma and drama and a lot of the things that we've done as the things that have been available out there. This is a totally different way of going about personal development and getting to where you want to go. And it's designed to be easy, but highly effective. So, and so even in that idea of going there, and this is for gentlemen and ladies. And I will also say the ladies that have read the book and also who have gone through the lessons, they say, oh my gosh, I didn't understand what men were going through. I thought this was just going on for women. And they send me these emails of gratitude saying, thank you so much. I see my husband in a whole new light. I see my boyfriend in a whole new light. I see my brothers in a whole new light. And then also the emails I also get are from ladies who have had their husbands go through the lessons, read the book, and they say, oh my gosh, I feel like I have the man back that I married. I don't know where he went and what happened, but I feel like he's getting him again, and he's starting to be a powerhouse in the relationship. He's starting to create his life. He's starting to create money, and I'm not excluded. And so that's really what the target of the lessons and the book and this entire conversation is giving people the tools so that that can become a reality for them, because most people have no idea how to get there. Nobody has a friggin' roadmap. Well, this is part of the roadmap.
So go to returnofthegentleman.com, returnofthegentleman.com, or you can go to drdainheer.com. That's Dr. DrDainheer.com, drdainheer.com. And I believe you can probably also buy the book there as well as be linked to some of these tools, but the free lessons are at returnofthegentleman.com. Dr. Dain, it's been a pleasure having this conversation with you today. I love talking with men about these topics because it's my greatest desire to want men to stop taking the emotional manipulation women give to them. And I want women to stop doing it because they don't know any other way. And so addressing the consciousness part of this and to really, because it doesn't get anybody what they want. And so those tools have not reaped the rewards I think people have been searching for. And so giving them other tools and starting to sort of take the lid off the pot, so to speak, and allow the authentic, real person and the alignment and the joy and the being true to oneself as well as others and having compassion and consciousness. It's just what I'm all about. So I really appreciate that you're on the show today. And I look forward to everybody getting your free lessons, getting the book, returnofthegentleman.com, and hopefully transforming some relationships as well as some men and some lives.
JJ, thank you so much. It's been an honor and a pleasure.